Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of the Unreal Engine 5 complete tutorial series. This is Billy T from Fortuna Interactive Studios. In this video, we will be going over the simple basics of creating your first project in Unreal Engine 5, navigating the engine's user interface, and just a general know-how of the entire engine itself and what to look for. And that way, when you get to the more in-depth topics, you'll know what you're looking for. So it's gonna be very basic today. And another thing I wanted to go over is I got some feedback from my last video going over what the tutorial series was going to be about, and I think there's a little bit of a misconception. So yes, this tutorial series is aimed at beginners, but it's also aimed at advanced and intermediate developers alike. And the reason for that is the beginning of this series is going to be very much aimed towards beginners. We're going to be starting from the very core basics, and I'm talking the most basic you can get, and then we're going to build up. And the idea of this series is that the videos you see here can be watched and should be watched in order, but they can also be watched individually. So if you need help with one individual topic, when there's more episodes in this series, you can just go back and find the episode you're looking for. So yes, it's mainly aimed at beginners, but there will be some more advanced topics uploaded, and some of them may be a part of the series, some of them may not. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. So before we get started, you're going to want to make sure you have the Epic Games Launcher downloaded. If you don't have this downloaded and installed, I will have a link in the description where you can do so. It's very simple. You just download it, open the installer, and then create an Epic Games account, and you're all set. Once you get into the Epic Games Launcher, you're going to want to go to the Unreal Engine tab, go to Library, and click this little plus icon right here. And this will take you to where you can install Unreal Engine. So clicking this plus will open this, and if you click on the version here, you can change what version you're going to download. So for me, I'm going to be doing the series in 5.2, but you can follow along in 5.0 and up. So 5.3, when that comes out, if you're using that, you can still follow this tutorial. 5.1, all of that will work. Every 5.0 and forward will work. So the reason that when I press this plus and the 5.2 does not show up is because I have it already installed, and this is just showing me what I don't have. So we're going to be using 5.2. Now I'm going to also walk you through just a little bit of this launcher section. So this right here is your projects, and this will have basically a list of every project you've opened, I believe, because for example, this Ruterra Dev, this actual game that I'm making right now, is not stored in the correct directory, but it still shows up here because I've opened it using the launcher. So I believe that's how that works. But this is just kind of a quick access to your projects. And then this is your vault. So this is where any assets and plugins or whatever that you've purchased from the marketplace right here, if it's going to load, will show up. So if you purchase something here, it will show up in your library. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the little launch button on 5.2, and I'll be back with you all when it's open. Alrighty, so we have the engine open now. And so basically what this window is it is a more in-depth look at your projects that are 5.0 and up, and I think some 4. Stuff will, or Unreal Engine 4 stuff might show up here as well. I'm not entirely sure. I've never actually used Unreal Engine 4 because when I started it was 5 when it came out. So but anyway, this is where you can see your recent projects, and then these panels on the left is how you will actually create a new project. So if I go to games, you can see a bunch of templates here. So we can have blank, which is just a completely empty project. You have first person, which comes with a first person character and a level for you to run around in. And then you can, of course, add your own things. Third person, same old, but just third person. Top down, a vehicle, and then some AR stuff and virtual reality. So we will be focusing on making a game. We're not going to make any film or anything like this. So if you are going to use Unreal Engine 5 for these purposes, and of course these are here for you. But we are going to be using the third person template. In my opinion, third person template is the most versatile to start with. And of course you can do blank if you want and create your own characters and things like that. But overall, in my personal opinion, the third person template is the baseline, because the first person template, it's much more difficult to add a third person character to it, especially as a beginner. Whereas the third person template, it is extremely easy to add first person to the third person template. Now I'll actually have a video on how to add a first person mode. It'll be a true first person to the third person template. So down here we're going to set our project name. So I'm going to call this the complete series, or we'll do complete tutorial. And here we have our target platform. We're going to be desktop. We're going to have it on maximum quality, and we are going to enable starter content. Now, starter content isn't always required, and I sometimes don't use it, sometimes I do. So this is really just personal preference if you want starter content or not. But for this tutorial series, I think it's going to be kind of useful just to have a few things to play around with, but it's not necessarily the most important option. So after you've set all this up, and we're going to be doing a blueprint project, not C++, and of course we can add C++ later. And I will have videos on that as well. But what we're going to be doing is just blueprint, and we're going to click create. And once the project is open, I will be back with you guys to walk you through the engine and show you how all of the engine is organized. Alright guys, so after you have created your first project, you should now be seeing this window appear here, what you're seeing on my screen. If you are just now opening Unreal Engine for the first time, probably looks pretty intimidating, so allow me to kind of walk you through everything that's here. So what you're seeing here in the center is the viewport. This is actually where you'll see your game actually run in real time after you've added some code to it. And of course, with the third person template, there is some code already applied. So we can actually press Alt P as a little shortcut to play, and you'll see we're playing. So we have our character here. We can run around, we can jump, and it's all set up. And we can actually, these are physics objects. We can move them around. And yeah, so this is the viewport, and this is where all of the action in your game will take place in front of your eyes. And of course, there's other view modes you can do, and after you build the project, of course, it's going to play in its own window. But this is where, while you're editing, you can see quickly what you're doing. So in the viewport, we have a few options. You have this bar up here, which is going to allow you to have a bunch of different options for you to choose. And a lot of these are very useful. I find show FPS to be very useful, although you can also use the hotkey for that as well. And what that's going to do is display your FPS over here on the right. Some of the other options here are not, as important right now. Screen percentage is sometimes very important. It's around 85 right now, and if you ever see any kind of differentials between, a screenshot of your game in full screen and what you're seeing in the viewport, it's most likely because your screen percentage is not at 100. So if you ever see any kind of discrepancies in the vision of, or the visuals of your game, just try setting this to 100. If it still exists, and it's another problem. But it usually is not that big of a deal, and it's meant like that because this is taking up that much of our screen. So that's what that is. I'm going to disable show FPS right now. We're going to head over to the next thing, which is this. So this will allow us to change our view mode, or how we're viewing our viewport. So right now we're in perspective, which is basically as if I were a camera that is flying around. So imagine I am a camera right now, and I'm controlling a camera, and I'm flying around looking at everything in the level. The next view mode is top, and so I'm actually viewing the level from the top. I'm using mouse wheel to scroll out and right click to drag around. So this is the top view. Then you have the bottom view, the left, the right, the front, and the back. So now, as you can see, we're not seeing them as solid objects anymore. And that's because we've actually switched into wireframe mode by default when we switch out of perspective mode. So this next thing right here is another kind of adjustment to how you are going to view your viewport and the details inside your viewport. So if we hit this right here, we can go to lit mode, which is the default, and this is basically the scene with the complete normal lighting, what you could expect in your scene. If you want to see it without lighting, you can go to unlit, and it'll just show the objects as if there was no light existing. You can go to wireframe mode, which is more of a detail setting. It shows you all of the vertices, or not the vertices, sorry, the edges of all of the objects. Detail lighting, I don't find myself using too often. And then you have some of these other settings here. Now, a lot of these settings will become more useful later down the line when we are getting into optimization stuff. For example, nanite visualization. So when we apply nanite to objects, this will become extremely useful to view how nanite is acting in our game. But for now, we're going to be staying in lit mode. And then you have the show thing here, and this is how you hide certain things in your level. So for example, you can see this little icon here is displaying where my player start is. So this is where the player is going to start in the level. Well, if I didn't want to see this little icon here, I could go to show, and I believe it's in sprites. And I can go hide all sprites, and it's gone. So that can be useful sometimes, especially if you're trying to take a screenshot in the viewport and not playing the game. So just keep that in mind. It's useful sometimes. I don't find myself using it too often, but it is very nice. And of course you can remove all static meshes and things like that. It becomes useful, but it's not the end all be all. Next, we have these buttons up here. These are going to become more apparent when we begin editing things in the viewport. So as you can see, I'm going to left click on this box here, and you'll see this show up right here, these red, green, and blue arrows. This is called the gizmo. So what the gizmo is, it's basically going to be how you control and transform objects in your level. So the first option is transform, and you can also, oh my gosh, you can also choose to just select it, and that's simply going to select objects, nothing more. And then you can click the translation, and this is where you can actually translate the object. Pressing Control Z to return it. Rotation is going to rotate it around its axis or its pivot point. And then scale is going to scale it. And if you hold down on the white in the center, it's going to do all at once. And you can of course do the little arm. The button here is going to cycle between local and global transformation. So you can see now that this right here is on the global plane. So if I were to rotate the object, the gizmo itself does not move. Whereas if I were to switch this into local, you can see that it's now conforming to the pivot point of the object itself. So it's not going to conform to the world anymore. And that can be extremely useful. Say that I wanted to fit this into a spot like this. It's more, what's the correct terminology? It's easier to do it when it's local than it is like this, where I'd have to kind of finicky, put it down that way. So that's what that is for. And we're going to return it to its original position. And then you can have snapping right here. So this will allow objects to snap to surfaces. And then these are the snapping adjustments for the different transform controls. So, well, first of all, let me also show you this. There's hotkeys for each of these. So the Q hotkey is going to put you in select. W is going to put you into translation. E is going to put you into rotation. And R is going to put you into scale. So when I first started doing Unreal, this was a little confusing to me, the hotkeys, because you'd assume R was rotation, but it actually makes sense with the order of these because it is Q, W, E, R. Of course, that's going left to right. So it becomes very simple to memorize once you get going. Now back to these snapping adjustments. So this is actually going to control how the object moves. So you'll see if I move this object here, it's going to snap to certain, like a certain grid. If I were to turn this off, you'll see that it now moves smoothly and does not snap anywhere. I can reduce this to 1, so it's still going to snap, but very at low increments. I can change it to, let's do something that's not too drastic. I can put it at 100, and you can see it's going to snap at much larger increments. And the same goes for rotation. So rotation is going to snap every 10. I can disable that, and it'll never snap. Or I can set it at something like 45, and it's going to snap every 45. Just like that. And then same goes for scale. So just to show you, I'm going to scale it up, and you can see it's moving, it's snapping. And then if I turn this off, it's going to be smooth. And then, of course, you can use the number adjustments. The next button up here is the camera speed. So this is going to control how fast your camera moves. And just to give you some more in depth as well, in order to move your camera, you're going to want to hold down the right mouse button and use your WASD keys. And that is how you fly around your world. Now, if you focus on that 0.8 camera speed up in the top right, you will see that it's going to move up and down as I scroll my mouse wheel. Because another way to control that camera speed is by using your mouse wheel. Or you can or you can set that manually like this, and now I'm extremely fast. But I find using my mouse wheel to be enough. The next thing we're going to go over is this panel on the right. So this is the world outliner. So what this does is it shows you every single object in your level. So this is very nice to organize, because if you have objects, you have a very large level and you don't want to have to fly to them and find them, you can use this world outliner to simply go to them. So say that this cube right here was very far away, so I'm going to get really far away. I don't want to fly there. I can go find that cube in the outliner and then click F to go to it. So F, think of it as focus, and you're going to focus on that object. So again, come out here. Oh, I'm trying to look for that object. I can't find it. Oh, I want to go to it. I find it in the outliner and I click F, and now I'm here. That can be extremely useful as well, especially if you have very, very large levels, to use the outliner to find your objects. Now, another thing you might have noticed is as I've selected different objects, this panel down here is changing. This is the details panel. So what this basically is it is the details, I mean, I don't know how else to word it, honestly, the information stored for every single object in the world. So this is the settings menu basically for each object. So this is a static mesh. It's a 3D object in the world. So what I can do to it is I can change the location, rotation, and scale. And you can see as I rotate this, it's going to change its rotation there as well. I can change the mobility. I can change the static mesh itself. So I could select something like this other cube and it's going to change. I can adjust the materials. So I can give it this pink material right here. I can make it simulate physics, which like these blue blocks down here do. As you saw when I was playing around, I was able to kick them around. You can see that they have simulate physics enabled. I can adjust different physics things as well. You can make collisions. So this box has default collision, meaning it is going to block the player. I could set it to no collision, and now if I play, I can walk straight through the box, all with one click. So we're going to set that back to default. Lighting, you can make it cast or not cast shadows. And then you can set it to not be visible, or you can even have it hidden in game. All of these other settings going further are not things we're going to be worrying about just yet. Later on, we will look at some virtual texturing and things like that, and some world partitioning, but right now we're not going to be worrying about any of that. But in general, your details panel when you're in the level is going to be how you adjust settings for your objects. And that'll become extremely important once we begin making our own blueprints that we will place in the world. Because if you make any variables in that blueprint that are exposed on spawn and editable, you can edit those in the level. So every single object has its very own settings that you make. So in that details panel as well, you can see the outliner for the object. So think of the world outliner, but just the outliner for the object. So you see this static mesh instance here has a static mesh component, and that is the only object in that instance. The next thing we're going to look at is the content drawer. So down in the bottom left, you have this little button here that says content drawer. Basically what this is, it is the file explorer for your project. So this is going to show you all of the folders and files of your project. Now, one important thing to note is these are all Unreal objects. So you cannot just drag anything you want into this folder explorer. Yes, technically, if I were to go to show and explore, it is its own folder. So basically what this is a different way to view this. But in order to be viewed here, they have to be Unreal's objects. So when you import things, like doing this, so I'm right clicking right here in the content drawer and going to import. If I were to import something, it would convert it to an Unreal object. So it's kind of finicky, and that way you can't just drag things into the folder, you have to import them. And sometimes you can just drag, but it's always safer to use the import function, as you're never gonna have to worry about anything being corrupted while you do it. But anyway, this is going to be how you view your folders, and you can organize them. So you can see the third person stuff is all in here. We have the character and the game mode. We have the character stuff here. So this actually is the character's body. Ooh, right here. And what I'm doing right here is I'm literally just dragging objects into the world. And it's really that simple. So if you want to take something from your content drawer and put it in the world, you literally just drag it out and you're all good. Now, one thing that I like to do with my content drawer is I like to lock it here, because you notice anytime I click away, it goes back down. And that can cause some issues sometimes. So what I like to do is I go to window up here, the third from the left. I go to content browser and I click content browser 1. And what this is going to do is going to lock a permanent content browser onto my screen down here. And this allows me to have instant and easy access to all of my folders and files in my project. You can also lock more, so I can put content browser 2 and I can drag it down here. And that's another thing that's great about Unreal Engine 5 is you can put this anywhere. If I wanted to put this in the middle of the screen, I could. I wanted to put it over here, I could. I wanted to put it up here, I could. It's very versatile, and you can make your user interface for your engine look however you want. but I like to put all of the content browsers. So I like to get all of them and drag them down here. And the reason for that is I might be working with several different folders at once. I might be working with, you know, a character blueprint down here, and that has to do with a material in this folder. And I'd be able to just go back and forth easily like that. So that's why I like to use that. But if you don't want these permanently on your screen, you can simply just X out of them like that, and they're gone. The next button we're going to look at down here next to the content drawer is the output log. This is going to show you any errors you have, which actually looks like we did have an error here, but this is going to show you any errors that you may have in the engine. It also is going to send you any debug messages. So if you were to print something to the output, it would show up here. The command is here. You can also do that in console command, but this is how you're going to enter console commands. Example, I can put stat FPS, and my FPS is going to show up. And there's a bunch of different console commands that you can type in here. It might be worth looking them up, but it's more of just an as needed basis. Another thing to do with the content drawer, sorry I already closed out of it too soon, is the filters. So I will go a little more in depth on, you know, nice filter setups and stuff like that later. But for the most part, if I were to just get rid of the filters here, if I wanted to filter any objects and I wanted to make sure that I can find what I'm looking for, say that I'm looking for every texture inside of my game, I could click this filter button right here. I could go down to texture and I could hit texture. And now I am filtering and only looking at every single texture that exists in my project. And then to unfilter and stop filtering through all of the textures, I could just click that button right here and it will remove said filter. So that's another thing that's very important there. It becomes very useful, but it's not something you can always use because you can also just search if you want to. Now, the next thing we'll be looking at is just some of these buttons up here and here. So we have this save button here, which I would definitely recommend saving as much as possible. I've had enough of my project get corrupted at times, and it's not the most fun thing in the world. So just make sure you save very often. You can press Control S to do so, or even Control Shift S in order to save all. And I'm actually going to click Control Shift S right now, because in the bottom right, you can see I have one unsaved item. So Control Shift S is going to save all, and now it says all saved. But yeah, I would definitely click this to save your objects save your level or project very often. Selection mode, this is going to basically dictate what mode you're in terms of editing. So you can use the shift key plus any key on your numpad or your just number bar to scroll through these, but there is the landscape editing mode, which of course I'm not going to go in depth in any of these options. I'm just walking you through what each of them are. So this is how you edit the landscape. I will be going more in depth on landscape editing and world building and things like that later, along with the rest of these options. The foliage painting mode, mesh painting mode, the modeling mode, fracture mode, the chaos system, brush editing mode, and the animation mode. Most of your work, I'd say 80% of your work is going to be done in the selection mode and landscape. Everything else is kind of just whenever you need it. The next button we're going to be looking at is this quickly add to project, as it says there with the subtitle, but well, yeah, the tag, what would you call that? But no, I don't know. Anyway, you can quickly add things to your project using this. So there are basic shapes right here. You can add a cube to the project, or you can add anything else that exists. So you can even go to the Unreal Marketplace and, you know, get things from there. You can go to Quixel Bridge, which is a very useful tool if you're making realistic levels. You can get some very, very nice realistic assets from there. You can import things to your project here, and in general, you can just add things. And one very important thing and nice tip is if you do click this, you can actually begin searching. So if I click this and just type cube, you can see the cube shows up. Do that again. Just type. Simply just click that and type, and you can add anything to your project that exists. Here is how you're going to edit your level blueprint. We might go into that later. I don't really recommend editing the blueprint for your level very often or using it for too much, but sometimes it can be useful. You can also use this to open different blueprints that exist in your project, and you can create new empty blueprints, which of course we're not going to go over that right now. That's actually going to be in the next episode. The next one is cinematics level sequence controls. We will go a little bit into level sequencer. I'm not the best at it, so I might just give you a basic rundown of how to use the sequencer, but it's used, you know, for making films and cutscenes and things like that. So It's not the most useful thing in the world for me personally, but it definitely can be useful later on, and I will have a video going through the basics. Now, so you can see it's auto-saving right there. Right here, you have the play bar, is what I like to call it. And so this is going to allow you to play in the viewport. So if I click the green play button here, I'm now playing the game. Click the red square to stop. And then you can select different play modes here. So I can play in a mobile preview, a new editor window. I can play in a standalone game, or I can simulate. Platforms, this is how you're going to build your game and cook your game a lot of times. So we're not going to really be focusing on this too much right now, but towards the end of the series we will be focusing on it, because I am going to show you how to package and ship your game for distribution, and this is a very important button for doing so. And so most games that I make are for Windows, so you go to Windows and package project, and as long as you have no errors, you're good. Another pro tip I would have regarding this button is try to package your project very not extremely often, but maybe on an interval once every week or 2 weeks or something, just to make sure that there's no bugs, because you rather fix the packaging bugs, you know, one by one than 100 at a time. So I like to package my project once a week and fix all the bugs and before I continue, but of course that's all personal preference, however you like to work. So that's just something that I've ran into that might be useful to you. And then up here, these are some very simple tools. So file is going to allow you to create new levels, open assets, save, you know, all of that stuff right here. And there's the control shift S, save all. Very, very important. You can even you can even create a new project from here or open a project. You can also zip up your project and open recent projects as well. If I go to edit, this is something that won't really be used all that often, because you'll most likely be using hotkeys. Like undoing is Control Z, and then redo is Control Y. You can go to undo history, which is going to view all of the history, and you can actually go back to the history of your undos and, you know, scroll through that. You can go to editor preferences, project settings, and plugins, which I'm not going to click on any of those right now. I will have a video in the future covering all of that. Window is what we used earlier. So this is one of the nicest things of the editor, is you can add anything, virtually anything, to your engine view and to how you want to navigate your engine. And another nice thing with Unreal Engine is you can actually make some custom menus and things for your engine, and I'll actually show how to do that for a few different things, like for example renaming a bunch of assets, right? You might have a renaming tool, so you don't have to rename them one by one. You can rename everything you have selected, for example, and you could enable that through here. And so for example, say I wanted to open another viewport. I could open another viewport and I could put it over here if I wanted to. It's very nice. So you can scroll through all of these and just see what you want in your engine, but for the most part, this is all you're going to need. Now, one thing I will say is once you have organized everything the way you want, I would definitely go to save layout and save layout as, and that way you never lose it, and you can go to load layout whenever it gets reset sometimes, and you can load your layout. Tools is where just general tools are going to be. We're not going to use that too much right now, but it does become very useful later on, especially if you have some customized tools that you might have got from the marketplace or made yourself. Build is how you're going to build some levels of lighting and landscape and things like that, and that's basically just going to compress everything and you know, what's the most simple term, I guess, make sure it's working, make sure it's all cooked right. And you might see an error or a red message pop up that says landscape needs to be rebuilt or something needs to be rebuilt. And for the most part, fix it by going to build, and then build all levels, or you can just build whatever it says needs to be built. But don't worry too much about that right now. We will go into more build settings and things like that later. Selection, I literally never use this, but sometimes it can be very useful. So for example, I can select all. I can select everything in my level. I could unselect all, or I could select one thing and then invert the selection. So now I'm selecting everything except for that box. I could focus on my selected. That's the F key I showed y'all earlier. So focus selected. And then you have all of these different options here, which I actually haven't used these at all before, but I'm sure they're very useful, and we might get into that later on. Actor, well, let me select an actor first of all. Everything here is very useful, but it's not anything that we will be using right now. A lot of these settings will just kind of be used on the fly, and as you watch the tutorial series, you'll begin to understand what these do. These are all very useful actually. And another thing to note is every single object in the level, I know this is kind of late, is an actor. So this block right here is an actor, this is an actor, these guys right here are actors. They're all known as actors. That's kind of the basic box, container of all of it. And then you have objects and classes, things like that. And I'll go into all of those intricacies as we get going later down the line. And then help is how you're going to get to documentation and things like that. So that's the engine. That's everything you need to know right now about it. Of course, this was just a very, very basic video, but I'm glad you guys enjoyed the first episode. It didn't get, thousands of views or anything, but it did do the best out of my entire channel in the first 12 hours. So made me very happy and made me get right onto this video extremely soon. So I'm really excited to get going with you guys. And if there's anything you'd like me to change or anything you'd like me to get to quicker, let me know and I'd be happy to do so. I can even make some specialized tutorials if you guys want, for certain things that you guys might need help with. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll have all the links you need in the description below, and hoping to get this uploaded within the next 3 or 4 hours here. Y'all have a good one. Thank you so much.